Thanks for joining me today. So, as Jan said, my name is Rhonda Young, and I am a registered nurse, and I work with CareOptimize as a project specialist, and just kind of do anything that comes across here that, my clients have a need. I've been a nurse for approximately 26 years, and I did my first EHR implementation back in 2003. Where I worked for a multi-specialty practice. So we were very early adapters on EHR. So I myself have seen a lot of changes throughout the years in different vendors and different EHR systems, just keeping up with the times, keeping up with new HIPAA regulations, regulatory for meaningful use, and all of those things. So I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about not only how do you choose your first EHR, but also how do you make a decision that it's time to switch to a different EHR. If you're unhappy with your current system, how do you decide that it's time to change, and how do you make a decision as to which one to choose from here? So we're going to kind of look at some key points to look at the EHR systems that you should look at as a practice and see what meets your needs. So we're going to kind of go through a couple things here. My slides are not working. I apologize. Okay. So first things first. So I did a little bit of research, and I found it interesting that, over the years, several people have adopted an EHR. So right now we're looking at approximately 87% of office-based providers are on some type of EHR. And statistics say that 38% implemented an EHR because of government regulations. 22% would say MU criteria, which is basically kind of a government regulation. 21% implemented to try to lower their costs in their office. And then 19% implemented to improve patient care. And when you look at these statistics, it's actually kind of amusing because the lowest percentage here was implement to improve patient care. And I think that that's one of the things that, unfortunately, with the EHRs is we do lose a little bit of focus on what an EHR can do to help you promote better patient care. And because we do get so bogged down with, well, we have to meet the regulatories. Are we asking the right questions for meaningful use? Are we asking the right questions now for MIPS? So as we talk through this presentation, you're going to see that some of the things that I talk about is not only does it meet the regulatory, but what can it do to help you improve your patient care? So things like care guidelines that prompt you to let you know this patient has a specific disease process and allows you to keep track of those things that go with that. So we're going to be looking at some of those things. And then the last thing is 40% of hospital executives are dissatisfied with their current EHR. So that's a pretty high number of people out there that have adapted to an EHR and are not happy with the results that they're receiving. So why would somebody consider another EHR? Why would you decide to switch midstream? So another pretty interesting factor is that 28% of providers are already on their second EHR. And given the time frame, we look back and we say EHRs started to become relevant, around maybe 2005. So within the last 10 years, you've had a lot of adaptations for EHR. And so that's a pretty high number considering that we've really only been into the EHRs for, maybe 10, 12 years. So you already have a lot of practices that have moved on. And so when you look at those statistics, the reasons that providers will tell you is because the solution does not meet their practice needs. The medical practice, going forward with selection did not adequately assess what their needs were. The current solution design is not fitted for their particular specialty. And then the last thing is that they're not happy with their vendor, that the vendor response to their issues is not adequate. So what are some of the biggest challenges in not only selecting your initial EHR, but also selecting a replacement EHR? So there's about 1,100, yes, believe it or not, there are about 1,100 EHR vendors out there. And some of them, some of them are very elaborate EHRs and only sell to large practices. Some are related towards hospitals, but there are a lot of choices out there for you. So these are some of the things that when I talk with clients about EHR and they're ready to switch over to something different or just ready to get in there, these are some of the things that I talk to them about, that we need to evaluate the cost, the ease of use, what type of hosting do you want to do, what do they bring to the table for implementation and training, what type of integration, interoperability, a lot about customer service, and then, of course, regulatory is extremely important as well. So costs of EHR are very variable. You can get a EHR that is free, you can go online and get an EHR, something like that, that's cloud-based. You can purchase software. So basically, the cost, you have to evaluate what your practice needs are. So 21% of providers say they will not implement an EHR due to the cost. So I have had conversations with practices that have made this decision. And a lot of times you'll find that providers that are in a smaller practice or maybe a one-provider practice that may only have 5 years to retirement, they will tell you that the cost of implementing an EHR is far greater than the penalties that they would receive by not meeting the government regulatory program. And, not only smaller practices, but I have larger practices that will tell me the same thing. So they do a little bit of research and they'll run some revenue reports and say, this is what I make on Medicare, and if I don't meet the requirement, this will be my penalty. And so they kind of focus on that and then what the cost of the EHR would be, and they make a decision that they would rather take the penalty. Sometimes that's not a really good decision because they kind of forget that those penalties can increase annually, so they kind of factor it in on a smaller percentage. But it is something that, is worth looking into and making sure that the cost of your EHR does not overwhelm the incentive payments that you may get from implementing that. And again, prices are very variable depending on features chosen. 45% of providers say they've spent more than $100,000 on an EHR. So when you're deciding what to do, it's very important to consult with your vendor to determine, the initial licensing or activation costs. What are the additional components? And then are there monthly fees? Is it multiplied times the provider? So make sure that you find out all of the hidden fees that are involved with your vendor because you may be thinking that, okay, so the implementation is $50,000 in the software. But then when you get into it and you say, well, where is this interface or where is this ancillary software, it becomes, oh, that's not part of your contract. So you want to make sure that you know everything that's included in that particular initial contact with them. And if you don't see something, ask, because the chances are that there may be an additional fee with that. Ease of use is the most important aspect of an EHR system. Systems have to be intuitive. Once you implement, you're going to be using this every day. So you want to make sure that it doesn't take away from your patients or add hours to your daily workflow. I always, working with providers for several years, I would say that, if my provider's not happy, nobody's happy. So I always say, make sure that you take advantage of demonstrations. Don't just have a room full of administrative people. Include your physicians in this. Make sure that they get an opportunity to put their hands on the system, see how many clicks it takes to get an exam done. The last thing that you want to do is have your physician go from seeing, 50 patients a day to 30 because they just can't get the work done in the EHR. So you want to make sure that everybody's on board, and how easy is this system to use. Another thing is hosting. What is your goal for hosting? So a lot of these EHRs can be cloud-based. Right now, a lot of vendors are offering options to do the hosting for you. When we first started years ago in EHR, it was pretty common that everybody, physicians had server rooms where they maintained their own hardware. They had to do their own upgrades. They had to make sure that, they upgraded their servers, things of that nature. And that has gradually moved away to becoming hosted environments. There's a lot of pros and cons to either way. If you have a larger practice and you can sustain the hardware and you can sustain the cost of IT maintenance, so those are all things that you have to think about, is how do you want to host this program. And also keep in mind, if they don't talk to you, if you make a decision to do the hosting yourself, you want to make sure that you talk to somebody about disaster recovery. When you're being hosted by vendors, they will take care of that for you. But, if you are hosting yourself, you want to make sure that you have that good disaster recovery. I noticed that one of the people on this presentation today is someone that I know from Savannah, Georgia, and they recently had a hurricane. So, that's one of the things that, a hurricane comes along, floods your office. Do you have a good disaster recovery plan in place? And if your software is hosted, you don't have to worry so much about that. Another thing to look at and talk to your vendor about is, what is their plan for you as far as implementation and training? So are they just going to install this software and say, here you go? Or are they going to stick with you for 3 months of implementation to make sure that everything goes well? Do they have a training plan for you and your staff? Are they going to come on site? How are they going to train everyone on this particular program? So these are things that are important to think about as well. And again, rolling back to the cost, is there additional cost for training? Is there additional cost for staying around for 3 months for additional support? So look at your facility and determine what your needs are, and make sure that all of that is discussed with your vendor when you are planning your go-live. Integration is a very key part of an EHR now. Again, going back years ago, you couldn't really integrate with PACS systems because they weren't ready to do that. You couldn't integrate with hospitals. So now you have those options. So you want to make sure when you're thinking about what your needs are, make a list of every vendor that you do business with. How do you do your radiology? How do you do your lab? Do you have a hospital that you work with? And find out from the vendor, can you interface with these people? And if you can't, what is the potential that you'll be able to do it in the future? And how much will that cost me? So make sure that you have a good integration system with all of the vendors that you want to work with. Also, if you have a practice management system already in place and you're looking for a new software, a new implementation, make sure that this is going to work with the system that you've chosen. And ask your vendor the hard questions. Do you have any other practices that have an interface with this particular practice management? If they do, ask for a referral. Ask to be able to speak to that client. Call that other client and say, I'm thinking about purchasing this software. I have the PM system. what kind of problems do you have? Make sure you completely vet that out so that you don't end up with a product that does not fully integrate with your practice management. Interoperability are things such as e-prescribing. There is an HIE network out there for doing referrals and sending CCDA documents. Again, this kind of goes back with the integrations, but make sure that all of your needs are laid out on the table. If you use Quest, is there a Quest interface? And how much does that cost? And, what support do you provide? Do you build all of the codes? Do we have to build the codes? Put everything out there. Make sure that everything that you need for interoperability is going to be there. If you do not have good interoperability, you are not going to be able to meet the government regulatory programs. So this is a very important feature that your EHR needs to have. Customer service with your vendor. One of the things that I always say is when you're working with a vendor and they're trying to sell you a product, and if they are not responsive to you while they're trying to sell you a product, they're not going to be responsive to you after they sell you the product. So make sure that you have a very good working relationship with your vendor. How's it going with them? Do they get back to you when you have questions? For example, you've had a meeting and now you're going to take this to your stakeholders and say, okay, this is what I found out about this product. And then you have a series of questions. Are they good about getting back to you and answering your questions? Do they hide information from you or not, be up front? So ask everybody that's working with you on this project, hey, how is so-and-so with getting back to you on your questions? Make sure you have a good relationship. If you don't have a good relationship and are not getting good support, that's probably going to follow you after the implementation. And then also, of course, make sure that your vendor's version is CMS certified and up to date. So, for example, right now it is 2017, but some vendors are still running on a 2014 certified version, which is okay because we just finished a year of regulatory that said that that's okay. And in 2017, it's still okay. But in 2018, the requirements are going to change. So you want to make sure that any potential vendor that you're looking at now, ask them that question. What's your plan to get CMS certified for 2018 for MIPS? If they don't tell you, if they don't know what the plan is, then they may be running behind the 8 ball. And if they're not certified, you cannot attest. You must have a certified version. Okay. So make sure that your version is certified. So those are the key points that I would look at if I were looking to purchase a new EHR system, or I have a current EHR system I'm not happy with, I'm going to move on to something else. And the second part of that is you've already, made a choice for a software. And conversions to another software are not easy, and they can be expensive. So make sure that going into that process that you fully vet it out, and that way you can be happy with the EHR that you choose and, move forward into the future and not have to make another decision.